And I got the baby, and baby just like came into my hands, onto my chest. And we had this beautiful moment where I look down at my baby and I see him, and it's like he's here and he's so beautiful. And I look at my husband and we both look at each other like, oh, and then we look back at the baby, and then we look back at each other, and then we look back at the baby, like in sync. Gave him a towel and I just held him in the tub, but just feeling like so happy, so happy.
I had my children on the floor. I was on my favorite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realized in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women. Like I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world, sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, Victoria, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you today?
Hello, thanks so much for having me. I'm doing well. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. Wonderful to have you. A student midwife, mama of three, birth worker, fellow podcaster. Fantastic to have you here to share your birth stories with us and your birthing wisdom through both witnessing so many births and your own. So today we're going to dive into your 3 home birth stories. Take us back to becoming pregnant. Did you know from the get-go, like, are you one of those people who just knew you were going to have a home birth, or was that a journey? Tell us the story.
Oh, yeah. Yay. Thanks so much. I have been really looking forward to sharing my birth stories. Can't wait. Yeah, so I think that I'll start at the very beginning. Before I got pregnant with my first daughter, I just started having dreams of having this baby girl and really feeling like I was going to have a baby soon. I was going to have a girl. And I had wanted to wait a little bit to get pregnant. So I was like, how about I just start right now, going forward, preparing my body for this baby. And I had so many beautiful experiences in the inner work that I was doing, really clearing ancestral trauma, awakening to patterns that I had that had been passed down through, from grandmother to mother to me. And, around not loving myself, learning how to really honor what it is that I was wanting in my life, learning how to speak my truth, how to hold boundaries, all this stuff that I really wanted to be able to like integrate that work. And before I had my daughter, so I could be really clear and careful not to pass all of that on to her. And I really did it. I did some very deep work before she came. And obviously the work, it never ends. It just continues through. But she was a catalyst for a lot of inner work for me. And I remember, we were not trying to have a baby. We were kind of at the point where we were like, okay, let's let go a little bit. If a baby's going to come through, baby's going to come through, but we're not going to like actually try to have the baby or prevent. So we were just doing pull out basically for a while. Like if baby sneaks in, that's fine. So that's kind of where we were. And I went to this really beautiful initiation for a young boy turning 18, whose name was Sequoia. And there was a moment, so when I had arrived, I was really feeling like I wanted to have this baby soon. And I was kind of in a little bit of conflict, like, do I just have this baby? Do I wait a little bit? We didn't have all of those, like the house and the job, like everything really figured out. And so I was thinking like that was necessary first, but my whole heart was like, this baby just wants to come now, and I'm ready to have the baby. So I went to this initiation, and as he was talking about his name, Sequoia, I had this big moment, and I felt like, whoa, that is the name of my child. Her name is Sequoia. And I went home and told my husband, we're going to have a girl, and her name is Sequoia. And just like knew right away. He was like, all right, that sounds good. And yeah, and then we got pregnant pretty soon after. The pregnancy test. It was so early on with all my babies. I found out so early. And so only one line appeared. And I thought, oh, I'm not pregnant. And I felt, a little disappointed, but we're just going to move on with the day. And I left the test on the kitchen counter, I think, somewhere. And I went back to the other side of the house. And then my husband, I heard him say, there's another line. I was like, what? And he ran in there and just like jumped for joy and jumped like into his arms and twirl around and the whole like really happy experience of finding out. And we were just, really overjoyed. And the pregnancy kind of took a turn. Everything was going well until I hit probably, 6 weeks and developed some really significant hyperemesis. So I was throwing up about 10 times a day. I lost 10 pounds. And I got to the point where I couldn't walk. So I'd wake up in the morning and I would crawl to the kitchen where my husband had left like a protein shake or something after he went to work. And I would like get it and crawl to the couch and just like sip it on the couch and throw up all day long. It was horrible. And my provider, I hired a midwife, just the first midwife I interviewed, who I really loved. She asked me like, what is your dream birth? Like, what do you really want to experience? And that's a question that most providers don't ask their clients. And I just felt like that was so beautiful. And I wish that I had, at the time investigated deeper the way that I was being treated and cared for. Sometimes I think that we can make assumptions about people assuming the best and thinking like, this person clearly aligns with my philosophy. And so I really like them and they're a great person. And I just decided that she was great. I wasn't reassessing and checking consistently for alignment with what it is that I was wanting and needing for my care. And so I was noticing that I wasn't getting what I needed for the hyperemesis care, but I also didn't really know that there were alternatives at that time with the first pregnancy. And her approach was like, it'll get better, sorry. There was really no care. I like that she would come over to my house for prenatal appointments and would talk to me and do the appointment while I was suffering, like lying down on the couch, not able to sit up. And she just really normalized it, which, caused my husband and I to also normalize it. And it wasn't until my second pregnancy that I realized, like, oh, I have hyperemesis and this is not normal. And there are totally things I can do, and that's part of a different story. But I remember that was very challenging until about maybe 20 weeks. And I felt much better after then. Yay. And the rest of the pregnancy was really smooth and beautiful. I loved being pregnant. I loved having, this big pregnant belly. I do remember feeling very alone, though, throughout the pregnancy. Not super, I mean, my husband and I have always been, and he is now my ex-husband, we're always best friends, but there's something deeper that we didn't have together that I was needing and didn't really, a deeper level of intimacy that I didn't realize I needed at the time. And so I felt very alone. And I had a lot of people in my life, but many of my friends were, not parents yet or nowhere near. I think I was 23 when I was pregnant with her, so I was still pretty young. And I remember trying so hard to create an experience for myself that was in alignment with what I really wanted for pregnancy, which was this like community connection, allowing myself to be centered. And I found myself educating, a lot of people and a lot of people really not acknowledging, it just the normalization of isolation and pregnancy was a big theme. And I found myself really fighting throughout pregnancy and postpartum to try to get support or try to have people, understand the importance of the connection and the support. Yeah, so I did feel pretty alone. And I think that that was a big theme for that pregnancy and birth for me. And the catalyst for healing that she offered was this awakening to see how I was abandoning myself. And I saw later on that the ways that I was abandoning myself were being reflected in my reality. And I created a lot of abandonment in my marriage, in my relationships with friends. And I just continued that pattern until it reached a head and finally decided I didn't want to suffer anymore and learned to love myself. So that's the biggest, I feel a little emotional talking about it. I think that's the biggest thing that my daughter helped me do and taught me how to do was to love her as myself. And I'm so grateful because if I could do like give her anything, in life, it would be a pathway and skills for loving herself. And I remember on her third birthday, we have this tradition where we go around the room and have everyone say something we love about her. So it's all her like little 3-year-old friends, and they're so cute, and they're like, "Oh, we love that you play with me," or whatever it is. And then it's her turn, and there wasn't any like, "Sequoia, your turn. What do you love about yourself?" Try to get her to say something. She was like, "Now it's my turn." Like I take the talking stick, and she was like, she just said like, "I love myself." It was so sweet. I really love myself. Like it was just so natural. She just like had that self-love. So I feel like I succeeded in my parenting and the goal that I had for her. So our relationship, I feel like, goes very deep and many like touches many lives for sure. So yeah, maybe I'll go to the birth now, unless you have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, did you have any early signs of labor approaching for you, or did it start like a bang?
Yeah, labor was something that I actually induced naturally at home. I had prodromal labor for weeks and weeks. It was around 35 weeks. I started getting a lot of prodromal labor contractions. And I was like, oh, my baby's coming soon. And I remember texting my midwives and I was like, can you come at 36 weeks? Or is it 37? And they said, yes, we can do 36. And I was like, great, because I'm having all these contractions. That must mean my baby's coming soon. Now I obviously know that's not true. And I like to teach the people I support to recognize that prodromal labor sometimes can be really, really long. And through that, I learned that labor is not linear. It's not like we're pregnant and then we're in labor and then we're in postpartum and then we're out of postpartum. We kind of just enter this portal, right, at the end of pregnancy. And I was totally in that portal, laboring a little bit and then tapering off and laboring a little bit. And so I was like dipping my toes in the water, regularly having so many prodromal contractions, and then waking up every morning feeling so sad that I, didn't have my baby yet. And it was around 40, almost 42 weeks. I was getting pretty close and I was feeling, pretty exhausted emotionally from this whole journey of the prodromal labor contractions. And my midwives told me, I didn't know this before, but told me around that time, we're not going to be able to bill your insurance if you go past 42 weeks. So if you want your services paid for, you need to have your baby like by this date, which unfortunately, I think a lot of people at the end of pregnancy are hit with some kind of something like that. Because of lack of clear communication and understanding, at the beginning with those agreements. So, and I was comfortable going past 42 weeks, but I was like, okay, well, I'm really ready for baby to come. And I feel like I'm right on the edge of labor. We checked my cervix and I wasn't, dilated enough to do a membrane sweep. So I was like, I'm just going to do some castor oil and encourage labor to come. And as you know, castor oil can make contractions closer together and more uncomfortable. And I did experience contractions really close together, I think, from the castor oil. So spontaneous labors can be much easier, but I still feel good about the choice that I made. It worked out well for me. I didn't have any big side effects from the castor oil, and I did take a very small amount. So I feel like I was really right on the edge, and just that little bit, it was like a tablespoon, with a little bit of mild circuit and some spinning BBs, I think was all that was needed. So I bet if I waited just a little bit more, I would have just gone into labor spontaneously. But yeah, it was perfect though. So I was I went to the bathroom and came out, walked down the stairs. My husband and I were just having like a labor induction day. And so, we're doing the castor oil, going on walks, having a cuddle, having sex, kind of doing the mile circuit. So we were doing some of that. And I came downstairs and he was making paper origami frogs as like an early labor project. So we weren't sure if I was in early labor or not, but I sat on the birth ball and I felt like I had come up on a little bit of mushrooms. I really felt this like wave of like whoosh, all that release of oxytocin. I felt like, whoa, like my heart feels so open. I feel so altered. Like I don't want to go anywhere. Like I'm not driving anywhere. I'm not going out. I really felt like I am going inward. And it was beautiful. It felt very blissful, very euphoric, sitting on the birth ball, like rocking my hips when I had a contraction and just breathing. I felt like I was just in bliss. It was a really, really beautiful experience. Um, After a while, I started feeling like I wanted to go on a walk. So we went on a walk and would stop, and I would have a contraction and keep going and stop and have a contraction. So things started to pick up. And then all of a sudden, I was feeling all this pain in my back. And it was around this time that I texted my doula, who is actually not a trained doula, but a wise elder in my community, who I was like, you must be at my birth. And she's a very dear friend. So I told her like, this is the same as all the prodromal labor with the contractions at this pattern, but I feel different. And that was the key, like this feels different. And she was like, I'm coming. She was a few hours away. So she starts heading over. I had some other women that were supposed to come to my birth, or I really wanted them to, and spirit aligned for them to not come, which ended up being the right thing for us. But my vision for my birth was to be surrounded by women who were like singing to me. I was really involved with women's circles and I loved being in that circle of women. And I had one who had a family event she chose to go to. I had another who wasn't expecting me to go this far and she had a trip to go to. And then I had another who was going to do videography, who I texted and she was like, I'm kind of tired from the day. Like, I'll drive down. She was a little far away. I'll drive down a little later when you're in active labor. And we called her in active labor and she just didn't answer. So it ended up being that just my doula was on the way at the time, and that actually was perfect. I did feel like the abandonment was a big theme for my birth for sure. I had to process that later, but it was also, like I said before, this reflection of self-abandonment that showed up in the birth. But yeah, my doula started heading over. My husband's mom came over and brought us dinner. And so we had a dinner and we were just hanging out. And then my back just started really, really hurting. And I started feeling like I was getting from the castor oil, I think, these like continuous contractions with like not a lot of break and all of this pain in my back. And I started feeling like I just can't do this anymore. In early labor, I was just in so much pain in my back. And his mom stayed for a little bit, massaged my back. She wasn't like planning to be at the birth, but it was perfect for her to just stay and give me a little massage. My husband would massage my back. And if someone was constantly massaging my back, and if I lived in hands and knees, and with like never getting out of hands and knees, which is very hard to do when you're big pregnant for hours, I was okay. But the second they took their hands off my back, I was just in agony. My midwife was like, try some, magnesium, try taking a bath. And so I think I took a little magnesium, but it was just like so painful. And then my doula arrived and she just, replaced mother-in-law and started doing back massage. And I had a big pop and a gush. My water broke in this explosion, just like the movies, all over. And the baby turned and took the pressure off of my back from her position. And all the sensations just moved right into my belly. And my doula is like covered in amniotic fluid and the floor is covered in amniotic. It actually like scared me. I stood up quickly and I looked at her and I was like, like what just happened? And then I said, I'm going to go get in the shower. I'm going into active labor now. I just knew it. So she cleaned up bless her. She's amazing. And I got in the shower and I had the shower hitting my back and it felt so good. And excuse me, that first contraction came and it was this contraction all in my belly. So the back pain was gone. And I had been longing for labor. I've been a lover of birth for so long. By that point, I had been a doula for 9 years. So I was just so excited to experience birth. And I think that attitude of entering it with this like yes, this like deep, deep yes and celebration of the experience is what allowed it to be so pain-free the rest of the time. I would describe her birth after early labor as a pain-free birth. I did not experience any pain. It was just like I experienced ecstasy. I experienced bliss. It was beautiful. And it was my baby and I doing it together. And my husband was there and he was, he was sleepy. So I would remember waking up from contractions and he would sit up from bed to just kind of be present with me and then he'd fall back asleep. So he was, not as present, but he was still there. But it didn't feel like with my others, with my current husband, it felt like we were doing this together. In this birth, it was like my baby and I are doing this, and I have people around me supporting me. And that was really sweet. So I just felt really connected to her. And I spent my whole labor in the dark. It was a 5-hour labor after that, in the dark, in the corner of my room, on my knees, leaning over my bed to rest. And just kind of getting upright during a contraction. And my doula just sat in the dark corner on the opposite side of the room, just holding space. And it's exactly what I wanted. I didn't want anyone bothering me. I didn't want anyone talking to me. And everyone was very respectful. My two midwives, husband and doula, were very respectful. At one point, the second midwife, which was like the backup assistant midwife, right, to my current one, came up and said, your midwife left to go to another birth. So this is like another layer of abandonment that came up. And I remember being like, in the moment, I'm in labor. So I was kind of like, okay, whatever, and that midwife ended up being the midwife for the delivery, which was fine, but I could feel that she was tired. I could feel that she maybe at times didn't really want to be there. So I felt really unsupported. Um, but once again, the experience was very positive in itself, with me just feeling like I was holding the container so well on my own. But looking back on it, I felt a lot of really deep abandonment, and that followed me in my next two births for sure. It was something that I really had to work through. Um, at one point, I started feeling like I don't really want to do this anymore. That was my transition. It was pretty easy as far as transition goes. I was like, I think that I'm done now. And my midwife sang me this beautiful song that I now sing to all of my students and doula clients. Do you want me to sing it? Okay, I will sing it. So beautiful. She came after baby was born and sang it again and recorded. I recorded it so I could learn it. So she wrote this song specifically for this birth. I am opening into love. I surrender it all to love. I am opening up to bring forth love through me. I surrender the reins to love. I am surfing the wave of love. I'm opening up to bring forth my sweet baby. I am opening. I am opening. Opening up to bring forth my sweet baby, my sweet baby, my sweet baby. I'm opening up to bring forth my sweet baby. So sweet. So that when she was singing that, I felt like so good. I felt so good and really supported. Like that was what I needed. Just kind of feeling like this is getting a little hard. And her song just guided me through those harder moments. And then, so this is, in transition, I look at my husband's eyes and I tell him to moan with me. And here he was really, really present. And we were looking in each other's eyes, and I just felt like no pain. But with the contraction, I felt like love was bursting through me. It was beautiful. It just felt like this love energy bursting through my body. And I was like just so humbled, experiencing and surrendering to all of it. And then suddenly I felt this pressure and I felt a little pushy. And my midwife checked me and I was 9.5. So she said, try to hold off pushing until your body really spontaneously is pushing. And so I went downstairs to get in the birth tub and I sat on the toilet to try to pee first. And I had this big contraction and I was like, she's gonna come out on the toilet. It felt like all this pressure. And I was like, I'm not having my baby on the toilet. I really want to be in the tub. So I get up and I try to like book it to the tub. And then I have another contraction in the kitchen and I like braced myself on the kitchen counter and bared down a little bit and had this like big spontaneous push. I was still kind of trying not to push, like she said. And I was like, what did I say? I said, it's so hard not to push. I remember like shouting that. It's so hard not to push, trying so hard not to push. I didn't really understand that I could push when I was ready to push. That instruction, I think, confused me
Yeah,
a
I
little
think
bit.
it confuses a lot of people. The whole thing
Yeah.
about like there's a lip or there's, don't push. Like if you feel pushy, you push. You just use
Uh-huh.
your body. That lip means nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I really wish someone had said, like, there's a little bit of cervix left, it's melting away, just listen to your body or whatever. That would have been nice because I was trying to follow instruction and that caused a lot of confusion for a little bit. But when I got in the tub, she said, you can push if you want to. And I was like, oh, it was interesting how I was outsourcing, still looking for instruction. Yeah, and so once I got in the tub, she was born, I think, in about 7 minutes. So it was very, very quick. I just pushed a few times. I was in hands and knees. Yeah, I was on my knees. I was leaning over the tub, and my husband was there in front of me. So I was kind of cuddling into him, and it felt really sweet. And then I instinctively felt some pressure. I remember saying, like, oh, it burns. And there was like a little bit of burning I was noticing as her head came through. And I had a fear of tearing, and I had not really addressed that fear. And I didn't practice pushing, I didn't practice preparing to push. Or what that any like emotional tools to support me and feeling confident in that moment. And so when that time came, I just went, I'm going to tear, I'm going to tear, I'm going to tear. I just started chanting because I felt overwhelmed by the sensation of pressure. And yeah, didn't have any tools. And I felt like I wanted to ask for help, but I had no idea even how to. And if I did, I don't know what anyone would say. So I just kind of went with what I was doing, which was chanting, I'm going to tear. And then I did tear. Though I didn't really experience pain, I don't remember pain from tearing until later. I think because of all the endorphins. It was a second degree, so it wasn't a really significant tear, but it was still like a good tear. And I instinctively lifted one leg up, and her head came out. And I said, there's her head. And my husband reached down and he touched the head, and I touched the head, and then we're just waiting. And that was a really sweet moment waiting. We looked in each other's eyes and we kissed and we cuddled. We talked to our baby and we said, like, come on, baby, we're ready to meet you. And on the next contraction. And this was another thing with the midwife. I remember she was right there and she wasn't projecting any rush on me, but I was worried that she would want to get the baby out because I had made my wishes clear about waiting for head and body with my other midwife, and this one I just didn't know, she
Mm.
didn't know that about me. So, and she did great in this moment, but I was a little worried. So I started pretending like I was having a contraction before I had the contraction, just to like just in case like she would to prevent her from saying something about it, about like waiting for the next contraction. So I started grunting a little bit, and then the contraction actually came. And with one push, we pushed her body, or I pushed her body out really easily, and she just came out right into the water. And then I reached down and picked her up, and I pulled her up to my chest. My husband put his hand behind her back and kind of lifted her up, and she cried right away. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience. And I remember saying, like, I did it. I did it. I'm amazing, which is just how I want every mom to feel after they have their babies. Like, wow, I did it. I'm incredible. Yeah, and we got out of the tub and got onto the couch, and I delivered the placenta. The placenta came really easily and quickly. The midwife did a little bit of downward traction on the cord after a while to help it clear, and there was no one pulling or anything like that. And she nursed right away. She latched easily. And then this was like 3 in the morning or so. And I just spent the rest of the next like couple hours hanging out on my couch while my family came over and were really respectful. We invited everyone over immediately, which I wouldn't recommend everyone do. It was very sweet though, the first grandbaby, our first baby, and it felt sweet to share that with them. Everyone came and silently just kind of sat in the back and just like loved us from afar, or would came one person at a time would came and kind of look at me and give me a kiss on the head. It was very sweet, and they would hand feed me blueberries and give me sips of water, and I felt very surrounded and loved, and got some stitches, for the tear. And then my midwife tucked us into bed. This was the moment too where I felt like she's tired and just wants to leave, where I was lying on my bed and was trying to figure out bed sharing with the baby. And I remember her attitude was kind of like, a little tired. And I remember that was really hurtful. And I still feel some hurt around that, just wanting the people who are, supporting me through these really vulnerable, sacred experiences to be loving and patient, and to like hold that like torch of like, this is an honor to be here, with you, which is how I like to show up and support moms and feeling. So I did feel a little sad about that, but we got tucked up, we went to bed, and then woke up in postpartum. Yeah.
Wow, beautiful. What a gorgeous first birth
Yeah.
in all of those nuances that you shared, for having that experience for your first baby. I love that for you.
Hmm. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a really beautiful experience, and a beautiful learning experience too. I learned so much from that birth.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you learned from the other two. So this was with your first husband. So what happens after this? Is there a break between babies and new husband, or how does your life unfold?
Yeah, yeah. Well, remember when I was talking about that peak of self-abandonment? I had just a lot of patterns of self-abandonment in my life. And when I think so my daughter just turned 2, and my father passed away very suddenly and tragically, and I became the executor of his estate. And at the same time, my husband and I were really struggling. And so it felt like everything was kind of exploding. Also, I was an apprentice for midwifery, and so I was working and going to school with this one person as an assistant midwife, and things with that also were starting to not go well. The midwife was also really abusive, and so my life kind of started to fall apart. And it felt like Kali, if you know anything about Kali, I felt like Kali came in with this beautiful gift of destroying everything in my life. Everything fell apart so that I could rebuild. And I went through the hardest 6 months of my life, dealing with a divorce, a legal battle with this midwife to get signatures for the work that I did, and very, very, very confusing, challenging, complicated uh, whole situation, where probate situation. So I had multiple lawyers all at the same time, and we're all like dealing with all these very complicated, challenging things. And it was me experiencing the consequences, all reaching ahead of abandoning myself. And also learning, it was kind of like I felt like my initiation into another level of adulthood, like the adult that I want to be, really learning about and understanding how to navigate some of these situations that we have to deal with in adult life, with like parents passing away, but also into, being the kind of person that I really want to be, which is someone who loves themselves. And there was this part of me that I really wasn't loving. And I think that was what was causing all of this to happen. So I went through this journey and I had this one experience where my husband filed for, what is it? Sole custody. And that was actually not his intention. Apparently, I found out later, just something his lawyer told him to do, and then we would negotiate later or something. But in the moment, I found out and thought that that was his intention. And that was the peak of abandonment that invited me to look in myself and figure out what it was that I was abandoning that was creating this reflection of abandonment in my life. And I remember feeling just so devastated, like, how could someone I love do this? And I went off into a field far away. I just went on a walk and just found this beautiful field by a forest, and I sat and I cried and cried until I found in myself there was this part that I was sexually abused as a child, and so there was this part of my child self that I was not loving and thought that she was gross, or you know what I mean, like all of that from the abuse. And remembered the way that my grandmother loves me, and I felt through her love of me, I found my love of myself, and of that part of myself. So I think that experience really served my growth in a really deep way. And that's when things started to get a lot better, slowly. Still dealing with the consequences of my actions towards myself before, but things just started lightening up. And after, so this happened in October, and then come May, I met, or was it March? Come March, I met my now husband. And I met him and immediately felt this deep connection. And we both had like a spiritual experience sitting at the park on our first date, facing each other, sharing poetry that we wrote with each other. And I felt like no one was there at the park. Like it was just us, like we were the only people in the world. There was like a time warp. And we spent the next few months deliberately not letting him meet my daughter and just being very, very slow in the way that we introduced him to her. He met her in July. So we spent that summer just being together and like very, very slowly creating this beautiful, integral foundation for our relationship, which was creating our relationship as a sanctuary, where we're deeply loving ourselves, which is our commitment to love ourselves, and our self-love is reflected in the container of our family together. So that's what we did. We spent 3 months cultivating a lot of deep trust and intimacy without sex, and decided to start having sex with a lot of prayer around 3 months. And I got pregnant, I think, a couple months in. And at that time, I was tracking my cycle. And it was very fun, like tracking my cycle and, being careful of ovulation windows. That didn't work for us. I think it's great. It works for some people. All the women in my family get pregnant so easily, and that never works for us. I learned. So I started feeling like something is wrong with me. Like I don't feel good. I feel nauseous. I feel emotionally off. And I was like thinking that I was developing some kind of illness. And I was testing negative on pregnancy tests. So because I could feel that I was pregnant from like day one. I immediately felt very tired and very shifted and had a lot of symptoms. So I was looking into providers and trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and kept testing and testing negative. And then one day I was on my own and I was like, I'm just going to take another pregnancy test because I really feel like I'm pregnant. And I took the test and I was not anywhere near, I was still going through a divorce. So I was not anywhere near being ready to, have a baby again with this person. and the test was positive. And I was like, oh shit. And I was like crying. And I called Planned Parenthood immediately to schedule an abortion. Not that I would, not that that's actually what I ended up doing. But I'm very like, pro women making choices, in alignment with their sacred no. And I felt like the answer is no. You know. I have to schedule an abortion. I just kind of reacted and like totally freaked out. And I called them and scheduled an appointment. And then I called my husband at the time, or my now husband, and I was like, I'm pregnant. And he said, "Oh, okay. Can I come over?" And I was like, "Yes." And he came over and we spent the day in consultation, kind of shocked. We went out into nature and we spent time in nature, and both of us were like, we want to just be really cautious and like really deliberate that the choices we make are in alignment with our soul and what our soul wants us to do. And I was really feeling on the surface like this is not the right time. I don't want to have another baby. And then I walked into the river and I just connected to my womb, connected to my ancestors, and I felt my soul like come on, and her voice was like, "Yes, you let's have this baby. Like you need to have this baby." And I was like, okay, I guess my answer is yes. I just felt very shifted. And he still was holding on to a lot of control, and wasn't feeling that ready. So he had a little bit more of a process to do. And we had a ceremony together and we prayed about it. And he opened a little bit more, but he had like this big like control thing coming up. He was like thinking we should live separately for a long time and like just be like really, in this weird structure that he created that he thought would be like the right way to begin a family together. But we both at the point were very clear that we wanted to be a family. And so I was like, what are we waiting for? We want to be a family. Let's be a family. I really just, and I love him. He's the most incredible partner. And he also wanted to be a family, but he had this control thing. So he met with one of his mentors, who married us, this incredible man, an elder in his community that supported him in his initiation into adulthood. And to was talking to him about it, and he said, Nicholas, you hit the jackpot. Don't fuck it up. I feel like sometimes we need an elder to tell us not to fuck it up. To, like, he was like very aligned after that. He's like, okay. He went out into nature and said, like, Divine Mother, give me some signs that this is, the right thing to do. And he had three different animals appear, that all had a symbol of a baby. It was really interesting. And he came back and he said, yes, like I want to have this baby. In the time that we were trying to decide whether to keep this pregnancy or not, when we had that ceremony initially, I did have this experience where the spirit of this baby, my son Thomas Sage, came in front of me. And it was one of the very few experiences where I've really just seen a spirit just right in front of me, like through meditation and prayer. And he like just communicated to me and I could hear his voice and I knew exactly what he was saying. It was a beautiful, like really direct experience with his soul. And he appeared as this, he had blonde hair and was like this masculine, like ancestor looking, like he was older, like this ancient spirit. And he said, I have this medicine that I want to bring to the world, and it's about sovereignty. This is like, and it was something that I can't really articulate into words very well, but I really deeply could feel what it was. And he said, like, if you choose to bring me in or not, it's okay. This is about you choosing to align with your sovereignty and making an aligned choice based on, what it is that you feel in your soul is best. And I would love to come through you and bring this to the world. And if now is not the time that you want to do that, that's okay too. So it was really this like, this is what I have to bring. And I want you to exercise the medicine that I'm trying to bring to the world now by using your sovereignty to make this decision. And I want to say, before we got pregnant with him, I'm remembering when we first had sex. For the first time, it was by the river. And I sat up right afterwards and I was hit with this vision. And I saw a man with blonde hair with muscles, and it was kind of just the side of him in this white light. And then all of a sudden, I was taken aback and I was looking far away at a city in the dark, far away at the city in the pitch black dark with the lights of the city. And this white light bomb came crashing down, like it came down from the sky and it landed on the city and exploded in this ball of light that just went like boom. um, and expanded outward. And the light bomb was so loud that it was silent, if that makes sense. And this, what the sound was a chanting of Om. It was this chanting of Om that was so loud that the bomb was silent. That's how I would describe it. It was very interesting. And I remember sitting up and I looked at him after I had the vision and I said, Whoa, I just had this vision and we're going to have a son one day. So I got pregnant and I see the same spirit that I had seen in that vision. So we decided to go forward with the pregnancy, and it was just it was the best gift for our family, because he was the catalyst that brought our family together and got my husband to move in with me to get married. We got married when I was like 7 or 8 months pregnant. And I'm so happy because I love my life. I love my husband. I love my family. I couldn't be with anyone better. So, do you want to hear about the birth?
I
Do you
do.
have any questions?
I'm also curious about for anyone listening who might have had hyperemesis or is currently pregnant and have it. Did you have it again with your son? And did you do something differently this time? Because you kind of hinted towards that. So I'd love to hear that too.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, yeah, I did have hyperemesis again with him, and it got better. I've noticed for a lot of women, hyperemesis tends to sometimes improve a little bit with more pregnancies. And I did notice that it got a little better with each pregnancy, but I still definitely had hyperemesis with him. And I remember just being in bed, just like puking profusely, all day long and not really able to function. Just feeling so, so sick. And yeah, I was working with a different midwife, and I don't think it was the different midwife that helped me realize this. I think it was me looking back and remembering. I just realized like this isn't normal. I don't want to feel this way. And remember now I'm really like loving myself and showing up for myself more. So I was like, I think that I need to get some support for this. So there were nurse midwives in my community that I was doing collaborative care with. So I was getting labs and ultrasound with them and then getting primary care from my home birth midwife, which was a really great model. It's really supportive. And I contacted them and I said, like, I need medication. And I really advocated for myself. And they were like, okay. And they just prescribed me medication. I couldn't go in. They said that you have to see me. And I was like, you've seen me before. I can't walk from the car you don't understand. Like I'm not capable of coming in to see you. I need medication. And they prescribed me medication and that was very, very helpful. So I was able to use Zofran as needed to help me function for a short period of time. And it made such a huge difference in my experience and my ability to keep nutrition in my body, which is important. So I felt so much better that time. And I did throw up quite a lot throughout the pregnancy and, would use the Zofran just to be able, in the beginning, to be able to not be suffering with nausea or not vomiting profusely. But if I was able to keep most of my meals down, I was able to not use it very much either, especially later in pregnancy. But around, I think once again, like 20 weeks or something, it got so much better. And I had a really beautiful pregnancy after that with an incredible elder midwife who has been attending births for 40 years. She's just the best. Um, and yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was like a really sweet journey having my daughter part-time. We would have her and be a family. And we also had some time, just my husband and I preparing for this baby, going on dates and, getting in some of that time before our baby came. And we lived in this small, but it was very small but gorgeous house with like live edge countertops and the beautifully like painted walls we loved. It was like our dream house, but just very small with a huge yard in a very quiet neighborhood with big, big gardens that I had put in. So we were just so happy all through the spring, planting our garden, big pregnant belly, spending time outside. It was a beautiful, beautiful time, and I enjoyed that time of my pregnancy and his pregnancy, I think the best.
Beautiful. Okay, let's dive into your birth story now.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so throughout that pregnancy, I was dealing with this legal battle, which was the last legal battle that hadn't finished, which was trying to get my signatures for the midwifery work that I had done in the past. I attended 50 births. I was supposed to get signatures for those. And the midwife that I was working for asked me to medically abuse people. So I chose to stop working with her, and then to punish me for that, she chose not to sign my paperwork. So we were fighting over that. And I got to, well, what was happening at the end of my pregnancy was once again a lot of prodromal labor. But this time I would really go into what I felt was early labor. So I would start to feel like, I feel shifted. I feel like, the hormonal shifts that we get where we feel a little bit altered and really inward, starting to enter a rhythm, intensity is increasing. I really felt like I was transitioning into early labor a few times. And there were twice, I think, two times that I messaged the team of people that we wanted to pray for us and said, like, tonight's the night. And then was like, just kidding. So, yeah, I realized that I think the stress of that experience was keeping my labor away. One morning I woke up at like 40 weeks, it was 40 weeks pregnant. So it was on my due date. And I couldn't sleep very well that morning because I was so stressed about this midwife and this experience I was having with her. And I felt so trapped. And I sat on the porch in the early morning it was like May 29th, I think was my due date. Um, I watched the sunrise, and my friend had sent me this song that she wrote, this beautiful prayer song. So I played the song and I just cried and cried while listening to the song on repeat. And the song really helped me to connect to my soul and find my integrity again. And that was the lesson I got from my experience. I realized that with that midwife, I was out of integrity. And that's a whole nother story. And when I found my soul and I found my integrity again, like I relaxed and opened up, I realized that I was giving this person so much power and I could walk away at any time if I wanted to. And really, a better way forward would be for me to learn midwifery in the way that I want to practice it from someone who practices, in a more loving way. And so I realized that I could walk away, and I chose to walk away in that moment. And if that was what my integrity was telling me to do. And so I wrote an email to the lawyers and all the people, and I said, I'm walking away from this. And it ended up being that this midwife they still ruled in my favor. So I had walked so far, that we did end up having that ruling. And she ended up not being a preceptor anymore. So there was some justice that came from that, which was really beautiful. Fighting it and fighting it and fighting it, I don't think was going to take me there. But when I surrendered, it immediately resolved. And yeah, and then my baby came 2 days later. So I think that was what needed to be wrapped up before I felt ready to go into labor.
Mm.
So I had early labor in the morning. I woke up at 1 a.m. to contractions that were, you know, let's see, probably 10 minutes apart. And they were waking me up. And so I would, with each contraction, kind of grab my sleeping husband's arm and squeeze it and breathe and then go back to sleep. And he just apparently slept through all of this. And early in the morning, I got out of bed and I was like, I didn't sleep very well. My midwife was planning to come over that day. So she comes over and I was like clearly in this, you know, probably early labor pattern, but I had had so much prodromal labor, we weren't sure. And I asked her to do a little sweep, like a gentle sweep to encourage, see if we could just tip it over a little bit. That was more my personality was to try to tip it over. My counsel now for women is typically like if you're in that place, it's better to take magnesium and rest or take a bath and rest than to try to tip it over. But that was not my personality. I was not a very patient person back then. So she did the sweep. Nothing changed. And we had a really beautiful day in the sun, going on walks, having sex, cuddling, watching The Office on my birth ball where I rocked my hips. I didn't do any castor oil this time, but things just started to fizzle down in the evening. And I felt like pretty sad about that. And my acupuncturist, who had been so supportive throughout this pregnancy, said, I'm available this evening if you want to come see me. And I said, yes, I want to come see you. So we jump in the car at like 6 p.m. and go see her. And I'm on her table and she puts in the needles that encourage pulling the energy downward and encourage cervical changes. And about 5 minutes in, she stayed with me, which was great, just doing energy work. I had this vision of a big spider, and the spider is my ally. It's like my spiritual ally. I have a deep relationship with the spider, grandmother spider. So, grandmother spider, I saw her on my front porch, like guarding my house, like the protection was there. And I had this vision, and the vision faded. And then it was like you're standing at the edge of the cliff and you just fall off into active labor. In one contraction, there was no buildup. I was just boom in active labor so quickly. And I was like, that was a really big contraction. And she said, we're taking the needles out. No. So she took the needles out, and I had another contraction. And I was like, get these needles out of me. I'm in labor, so she took the needles out. I run to the bathroom and I text my birth photographer, who's my dear friend, like, I'm in labor, come over to my house. She goes to my husband, who's waiting in the waiting room, and she says she's like entering this altered state. She's going into labor, and like gave him a little warning. And she walked me to the car while he went to pee really quick. And so we're in the parking lot, and I'm like leaning over her and leaning over my car, kind of having these like big contractions. And he runs out, and we get in the car and we go to drive, and we have to turn out this alley. And there are these two college kids that are walking so slowly, and we're right behind them driving inch by inch. And I was just cursing, like it's just the contractions were so intense, so close together. And I remember just holding on to the little hanger in the car and going, fuck, 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 fuck. Because it just hit so intense. And I called my midwife and I said, like, I'm definitely in labor. And she was like, do you want me to come now? And I said, maybe, come within the hour because I'm definitely in labor, but it's a beginning. So who knows? I hang up. I have one more contraction. And I was like, no, she needs to come over right now. This is happening. So I call her back and I said, actually, come right now. And she said, I'm on my way. So that was my team, and it was perfect. And I love them, these two people, so much. And they both came. Yay. And my photographer friend had a 6-week-old baby. So she nursed her baby to sleep in my daughter's room. My daughter was with her dad, and got the sound machine on, and the baby just slept through the whole birth. And it was a beautiful birth. It was very intense. It was 2 hours, and my contractions were 2 minutes apart from the very beginning. I would say in the very, very beginning, it was like 30 seconds in the car ride. They were like, I was mostly contracting. It was very interesting. And I don't know if that had anything to do with the interventions, that we used to send me into labor. But yeah, it was very intense. When I was laboring in my home, I think I ran inside and I went to my room and got on hands and knees leaning over my bed. And I was like, this isn't working. And so I went to my couch and I tried the same thing. And I took a little pillow and I would just squeeze the pillow and bury my face in the pillow and like moan. And that was working. But I felt like I was being hit by a train, going so fast. It was hard to really get on top of them like I could with my first, even though they were 2 minutes apart, I felt like I mentally could get on top of them. This one, it felt like I was just being steamrolled. It was very, very intense. And I remember just begging, I was like begging the universe for relief. From probably the very beginning, it was really this intense experience. And I was like, please, God, like let it be over. And my husband was great. He set up the tub and we kind of went through this whole cycle of me trying to find a rhythm where I was like, hand me the pillow. And I tried the pillow and I'd be like, take it away and like, help me stand up. I'm like, no, I don't want to stand up. I want to lie down. And I was just kind of demanding things, do this, do this, do this. And he was just orienting himself however I wanted him to be, trying lots of different positions. Eventually, I started to feel like maybe I needed to pee. I sat on the toilet and my water broke on the toilet. And after my water broke, I entered transition and I had this wave of nausea and like agony. I would say it felt like this wave of agony. And out of all my births, this was the moment that was the most painful for sure. I got on my hands and knees on the bathroom floor and I stopped moaning and I just became silent. And my midwife thought that I was actually getting a break from contractions. So she was just kind of leaving me alone. And I was on hands and knees, kind of with my booty in the air and my face on the ground with amniotic fluid. And I just was able to get out, like, give me a towel. And my husband put a towel like under my knees and under my hands. And I was just holding so still. And any movement, breathing, was just made it intolerable. And my husband had to be consistently saying affirmations. And if he was saying, you are loved, you are safe, your baby is safe, like you can do this, you are whatever. If he was saying that, every single moment, I could choose to pay attention to that affirmation and I was surviving. But in the space in between that and his breaths, I was suffering. Yeah, I needed this like to keep my attention in every moment on the affirmation to cope. And I remember getting to a point where I felt like it wasn't enough. And I never was like, well, yeah, in their moment in my mind, I was like, I'm ready for my epidural now, like I'm ready to take me to the hospital. And I knew that there's no way I could get in the car, go to the hospital. It's just a clear transition experience, Um, and I said, tell me life is worth it. Like I needed something deeper, to get me through that moment and remember why I was choosing to have an unmedicated birth. And he said, life is worth it. Life is worth it. And that affirmation was so helpful because it struck a chord that went so much deeper than you're safe, your baby is safe, like you can do this, kind of stuff. It was like helping me remember my purpose as to why I wanted this kind of experience. And I felt like, okay, this is what I'm being asked to give in exchange for my baby. I can do this. It was that deeper level. And then I had a spontaneous push. And I said, I'm pushing. And my midwife came in and she said, you're pushing? And she didn't know that I was like, she thought I had a break. So she was like, whoa, you're pushing? She tried to do the Doppler. And I said, no. I was like, "Hey, don't touch me. I can't do it." And she said, you can decline. And I say, I decline. I can't have anything touch me. And she said, okay, that's fine. I tried getting in the birth tub earlier, but it was too warm and it made the nausea worse. And I was like, I'm going to have my baby on the bathroom floor. I'm not moving. And my midwife said, are you sure you don't want to get in the tub? I know you really wanted the tub. And I had set up, flower petals and beautiful things around the tub. And I was like, no, I'm staying right here. And she was like, okay. And I had one more push and I sat up and I was just like, get him out. Like, I just want him out. I want this to be over. And he wasn't coming. And my arms were getting really tired. So I said, if I could just get to my couch, I could stay in this position, but I could lean over the couch. I'm going to do that. So I got up and everyone was surprised. All of a sudden I get up and I run over to the couch and I saw the tub and I was like, what the hell? I'll just get in the tub. And I'm so glad that I did. And the water was pretty cool because we had forgotten that it was still filling. So the water ran cold and it was perfect. It was lukewarm, I would say. Probably not like they wanted to be warmer for baby. He was fine. It wasn't like cold at all, but it was perfect for me. So I get in the tub and I'm leaning over My husband's on the side, like sitting on the couch, which is next to the tub. So I'm leaning over his lap, kind of. I think, or maybe, I think he was sitting on the couch and holding my hand. I was leaning over the edge. And I was saying, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. It was still feeling like very intense, but much better, much, much better than transition. I did feel like a lot of that nausea and agony had resolved, but there was still some intensity there. I didn't really know the difference between contraction and not contraction. It was just all right. Like I just felt everything was sending baby out continuously, it felt like. And then I did a push spontaneously and I felt him start to crown. And I said he's crowning. And we had practiced perineal massage to prepare emotionally, right? And we practiced using affirmation and visualization. So I had tools this time. And we had practiced really like, adding a lot of pressure before and me feeling really safe with that in the presence of that pressure. And I think that helps so much. So when his head came to crown, my husband said what I told him to say, which is go slow. So he said, go slow. And I said, okay, yes, I'm going to go slow. So I just went really slow and I held the pressure and I felt no pain. I felt no fear. It was just pressure. And it was a beautiful feeling of just having the pressure of my baby's head there. It almost felt a little orgasmic too, like there's, I think, some pleasure that can be experienced from pressure and internal stimulation. And I definitely felt a little bit of that. At the same time, I was also feeling like ready for the baby to come out. So I wasn't in orgasm, but there was no pain for sure. And that moment was pretty blissful. And then on the next contraction, his head came out, and I said, "There's his head." And my midwife said to my husband, "Like, get in the tub." So he takes off his pants and shirt and hops in the tub in his underwear. And it's beautiful. The lighting's beautiful. Our music is beautiful. There's flower petals everywhere. It was just really like the dream. It was so beautiful. And me being impatient, I said, like, do some gentle downward traction. So I was taught to quote deliver, like really catch babies. And the way that I did in my midwifery training was to do the maneuvers, hands-on maneuvers. And that's another reason why I left, because I really didn't feel like that aligned with my philosophy. I felt like I was extracting babies from people
Mhm.
instead of letting them birth their babies. So but in this case, I felt like I wanted some of that hands-on support. So I taught him these and he just did a little down. He didn't pull, he just did a little downward traction. So I'm pushing and I'm saying gentle downward traction, just feeling so calm. And I think I was calm because if I wasn't, I wouldn't be coping well if I wasn't calm. So some moms have to roar. I couldn't bear doing that. I had to be really calm to cope. So that's why if you see my birth video, this one is tagged in my Instagram page, the peaceful birth method. You can watch it. It's really beautiful. But I was just very chill because that's how I could cope in the moment. And I said, do a little gentle downward traction. So he did a little bit of that. And the midwife said, like, wait for a contraction. Like she didn't want him to be pulling on baby. And I don't think she realized that we had talked about this already. And I said, but he's almost out. So she said, okay. And she kind of backed off. And then I could feel his top shoulder cleared. I could feel that clear from my pubic bone, and I could feel that he needed to be lifted up. And my body would have just done this without my husband lifting him up, but this is what I wanted, and it purely came from impatience. But it was also perfect. So I said, like, now lift him up towards you. And I gave just like a little, like, like a little push. And he said, he's coming. And the baby just came out of the water in my husband's hands. And he lifted baby up kind of onto his chest and used his body pushing his chest forward to, hand the baby to me. And I got the baby, and baby just like came into my hands onto my chest. And we had this beautiful moment where I look down at my baby and I see him, and it's like he's here and he's so beautiful. And I look at my husband and we both look at each other like, oh, and then we look back at the baby, and then we look back at each other, and then we look back at the baby, like in sync. And that's the moment I wanted. I remember with my first, I looked at him like wanting that, like, we did it, like this connection look. And I remember the moment she came out, it's like I was alone, and all eyes were on baby and no one was looking at me anymore. And with this experience, we were doing this together. And so we like looked at each other and we looked at our baby and we just held each other and gave him a towel, and I just held him in the tub, just feeling like so happy, so happy. Yeah, and we got out of the tub and I got on the couch and placenta came out really smooth and easy. And I was just holding him. He's so beautiful, like seeing his cute, beautiful face. And that postpartum was a little harder immediately. I did lose more blood and I didn't tolerate losing the blood very well. And so my midwife gave me a little Pitocin per my request before she was even at a place thinking I needed it. I was like, give me the Pitocin. She gave me one dose and I said, give me another one. I was like, give me more Pitocin. Because I could feel that I wasn't tolerating the blood loss very well. So she gave me another one and I felt like I couldn't really hold the baby anymore. So my husband held baby skin to skin and I threw up. I felt kind of shocky, and really pale. I remember sitting up to see if I could pee, and I went white, and I had to lay back down. So we were just feeding me. My birth photographer and my midwife were feeding me electrolyte water and cheese sticks, and trying to, control bleeding. And then my mother-in-law and father-in-law came over, and they were really helpful and helped me walk to the bathroom, my mother-in-law, and helped me like get, a pad on and everything when I was ready. And I went back to the couch and I was feeling a little bit better, but I think it really was like 45 minutes of me not feeling good, not being able to hold baby. But my husband held him and sang him Hanuman Chalisa, which was a song that's really special to us. So that was his first song, and just loving him. And he came back and he wasn't really nursing right away. He was trying to, but we weren't really able to get him to latch. And then my friend, who her videographer, her name is When a Belly Blooms on Instagram. She came out with her baby Freya and she sat on the couch and Freya was nursing. And the second after 20 minutes of really trying to get him to latch, Freya comes out and sits down, or she sits down with Freya and Freya latches and then my baby just tilts his head back and goes, ah, like makes this little lion cub roar and then goes, and just like goes on the breast and latches. It was so sweet. So we like to say that Freya taught him how to.
Oh, that's so cute.
How to latch. Yeah. And the postpartum was beautiful. It was the best postpartum of my three. I had all the traditional meals from the first 40 days from my mother-in-law, a lot of care and support of my 3-year-old. And, or was she 4? No, she was almost 4. And I stayed in bed for 3 or 4 weeks. And then after I was on the couch and on the rocking chair for several more weeks, and we had the summer. So we were just really gentle in the yard, in the shade, and, staying at home for a long time. We'd go to the river sometimes and sit by the river in a comfy portable chair with baby. So I really rested and I felt so much better with the resting. Intimacy was better afterwards. Like my experience, like wasn't stressful. And then my husband and I really began. He quit his self-employment, or let me think. I think he took a pause on what he was doing with self-employment at the time, and we both really dove into building my current business, Peaceful Birth Method. So we just both worked from home with our baby, working together to build that up for many months. So it was just a beautiful, joyful experience postpartum.
Oh, beautiful. How nourishing. And going back to your story of having a bit of a bleed there, for anyone listening, one of the things with having a really precipitous birth, because you had a very intense short birth, right, is that we can have a bit of a bleed. It can be a bit of a shock to the system, isn't it? But it seems like you were just so deeply nourished, both by everyone in your house and who came around. Like everyone just kind of knew how to support a postpartum mama. Sounds beautiful, and what a
Yeah.
blessing to have that gentle months really after.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. I feel like he came in and just brought our family together. We bought a house not too long after that and really got like our businesses profitable, and just things were growing and growing and growing so quickly for us after he came in. So yeah, I'm so grateful and grateful for that. I'm gonna turn this heater down. Grateful for that experience. It was all my births were beautiful. There's something really, really extra special about his, for sure.
Oh, lovely.
Mhm.
And how long before the third one came around?
Yeah, I was 5 months postpartum, or was I 6 months? 5 or 6 months postpartum. Yeah, it was once again, quite the surprise with the breastfeeding and the pullout. We were like, that should be enough. But I think I just, haven't learned my lesson. Around our family, we get pregnant so easily. But, this time after this baby was born, he got a vasectomy. So we were like, we're definitely, we're definitely done. We need to use some form of permanent birth control, make sure we don't get pregnant again. Yeah. So I remember starting to feel a little funny, like I was probably pregnant, and I smelled peanut butter and was like, oh, it's a horrible smell. And my husband said, oh, you're pregnant. He just knew I was pregnant in that moment. And I tested, and I think once again, it was like it was negative, like we weren't really seeing it. And then eventually I was seeing like that little tiniest, faintest little line ever, because we just found out so early. And I texted my midwife, I think in all caps, and I was like, I'm pregnant. Will you be my midwife again? And she was like, yes, of course. So I had a really great team, and a big, beautiful house, which was nice. The last house was smaller, which made some logistics a little bit more tricky for home birth. And I remember when we bought this house, I went upstairs to our room. Our room is beautiful. And I said, if we buy this house, I'm going to have a home birth here so I can give birth in this room. And then, of course, like right away after we moved in, I got pregnant. And we were like, well, let's do it. We were wanting to have a little more space in between them, but it really turns out that the way that things unfolded were designed better than what we were wanting, what we thought that we wanted, like to space our kids out far apart. I'm so glad my kids are close together in age. It's so fun. Um, and I feel like just having them really close makes them have this like really deep friendship, where they have like Sequoia, my oldest, plays with the younger ones, but with that age difference, they're just in totally different places. And both the boys are ages 1 and 2, and they're just besties. And it feels really, really sweet. When I was pregnant, with my second, I talked to a medium, and she said that she saw me with twin boys. And I was like, that's funny. I'm having a boy. He's the sign of the twin, the Gemini. But twins were a really big theme. Also with his pregnancy, the second one, I was told with an ultrasound, we think you're having twins because we don't see the gestational sac, but you have high HCG levels. So we think it's twins and you're early, but it was just one and I have HCG. So there's a lot of like, I'm high HCG. There's a lot of twin themes happening with the first, but I was not really wanting to carry and birth twins. So that was just not for me. I mean, if I got pregnant with twins, we would roll with it, but that wasn't something that I wanted. So I think that this is the way that the twins were going to happen for us. And I had less hyperemesis this pregnancy. I also had really great care, really great medical care. And I had the Zofran beforehand, and I only needed it a little bit because it was much better. In the third trimester, I started throwing up more. I did have some nausea come back, but it wasn't too bad. I would throw up here and there. But otherwise, the pregnancy was really beautiful. I had pretty simple pregnancies outside of the nausea. I did feel much more weak. I got some iron infusions that were really helpful and took beef liver, which was helpful. I tried to eat organ meat, but it was so hard for me to do in the pregnancy. I had a lot of food aversion. And a little more aches and pains. So I was getting more body work, which was helpful. Just my body having just had a baby was still recovering while I got pregnant with my next baby. But I was surrounded by a lot of really loving people, and I had the best care. I got great chiropractic and acupuncture care, pelvic floor care, massage, with incredible, beautiful practitioners in town that really cared about me and my body and my family. And my massage therapist, who had been my massage therapist for my previous pregnancy, is also a doula, but she only takes clients like 2 times a year because it's a very special thing for her. If I would describe her in one word, I would use the word integrity. She's someone who really embodies integrity. And I felt like I want her at my birth. I would like to have a doula this time. And so I asked her if she would come, and she like had a whole she like took the time to really pray about it and connect with her soul about it and connect with the spirit of my baby, and came back and said that the answer was yes, that she felt like that was the right thing to do. And bless her, I'm so glad she was at my birth. I needed her. I really did for that birth. So yeah, I also, my midwife, her husband was going through cancer and he had a surgery around my due date. So we hired another midwife in my community that I really loved to be the assistant or backup. And that felt great. And so I had like a really solid structure and I felt really good. If my current midwife couldn't be there, her name is Margie. If she couldn't be there, then this other midwife would be there. And it turns out that they both were able to come. But this really big theme in that pregnancy for me, going back to the sexual trauma from my childhood, I was this feeling of I'm all alone and no one loves me. This is like the biggest wound of my life, I think, and it's a theme that sometimes that part becomes activated, and I can start to really feel like I'm all alone and create those experiences in my life where I feel like I'm all alone, or I feel like I need to abandon myself to be alone because being alone is more normal. It feels like more normal or what I deserve. It's like a whole thing. So that was really coming up in my third pregnancy. A lot of fear of being all alone, dreams about the sexual abuse, or feeling like I was alone. We also did ceremonies where we would, pray and light candles and set up an altar, pray for the birth. And it was just sexual trauma that was coming up. I couldn't, in that spiritual space or that energetic space, find the clarity around the pregnancy or the birth or anything. It was all just really about this wound coming up. And for my first two, I knew that I was having a girl or a boy like right away. And I got really clear around who they were. I had a direct experience with their spirit. With my third, I thought it was a girl and then it actually was a boy. I had no idea. Later in pregnancy with my acupuncturist, she supported me in kind of getting clear around like who he was and helping me to feel him. There were some like energies that needed to clear from my field, and once we did that work, I could feel him more clearly. And it wasn't the same as my others, it wasn't as like you're right in front of me, but I could feel his spirit and I had a few visions and it was so beautiful. He was this like I saw him as a child, a wild boy kind of, and just like running around in the forest, kind of like in running in circles above me. And then he turned into a bird and was flying. And I saw him flying, like maybe he was a hawk over this beautiful vision of like this bright life-giving green kind of color around of the mountains and trees. And he landed as a person, as a grown man. He looked a little androgynous, had long brown hair, actually, and he looked out around, maybe I'll say, like he looked down the mountain that he was standing, and I got this feeling of this deep love of life. Like, life is so beautiful, and I love life so much. That's like the feeling that I was getting from him. Um, yeah, and my husband, I went home and I described that to him, and he started to really feel him. It wasn't, I thought maybe he was like a wolf or there was a wild sense that I was getting, but it's not wild as in like, um, in the way that I was thinking it would be before, kind of this undomesticated, like, we're just expressing ourselves and we're like being our true selves and we're, you know what I mean? It's not like that. It was more um, like an artist, with this pure creativity, sort of, is how I would describe him, like this, the energy of creativity. So we decided to name him Wren, after the bird. And let me see, I think that's kind of like the biggest thing that I'll share for pregnancy. Is there any other questions you have about pregnancy?
No.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. So come to the birth, I had prodromal labor again, and I just, whenever I would get it, I would say, this is normal. I'm probably not going to go into labor. And I felt great, just recognizing that that was normal. So I did have a lot of it. And let's see, when I was 38 weeks and some change, I was sitting on the birth ball and had a little gush. And I thought, oh, like maybe that's my water. I'm not quite sure. And I checked it with the nitrazine paper and it was saying that it was blue. So it was saying it was my water. There can be false positives, false negatives with that. So I didn't really take it as my water was fully broken, but I was like, maybe it is. I was thinking that we were going to have sex that night. So I wanted to check and make sure that my water wasn't broken. And it did say that, the paper was blue. So I was like, okay, let's not have sex. Let's see if I go into labor. Maybe my water's broken. And I think what happened was one layer broke. And this is something I think a lot of people don't know can happen. One layer breaks, they could have a little gush. And in that moment, like the nitrazine paper can be blue, we can see the fluid, but the other, layer of the sac is still intact. So I think that is what happened. We waited 3 days, and research and evidence shows that if you don't have GBS, 3 days is safe to wait without increasing the risk of infection. So I waited those 3 days and tested and still was getting some blue paper, but there was barely anything coming out of me at all, nothing more than regular discharge level, just like I could wear one panty liner all day long. So I really didn't feel like my water was broken, but I was seeing that paper testing positive. So we decided to encourage baby to come with castor oil again this time. And this time I did the midwife's brew. And I was already, having a lot of contractions. And for those few days around that time when my water broke, I had moments where I would like clear my bowels and feel like a lot of contractions and feel like labor was starting, and then it fizzled out, which was really normal for me. So I did just I think it was 1 tablespoon of the castor oil again, and it sent me over. I was just right there on the edge. It was Monday morning, and my doula came over and did some massage for me. She brought her table, and she gave me this body work, and I felt like a coming up experience, sort of like I was entering this different realm, and there was a little bit of anxiety. It was a little like shaky kind of feeling. And once I kind of entered there, I felt like I had shifted into like an early labor place. I felt a lot better. And this is where labor began. And this is actually where early labor began. But I thought that I was in active labor because the contractions were very painful from the beginning of early labor. I had this, like I didn't experience before with my other two, this really deep cramp, low, deep cramp in my uterus. That was very uncomfortable. That kind of was always cramping and contracting. Maybe that was part of the castor oil. I think that's very, very possible. Castor oil can make labor more painful a lot of the time. Um, but my midwives were getting a little, actually, I'll say Margie was not as worried. And she was, because she's the old school midwife, and that's kind of what I wanted. But she was tending to some things with her husband. So she was able to come to the birth, but I was using this other midwife as the primary. And she wanted me to try to get labor to start. And I also, me being my impatient self was like, yeah, let's do that. I think now after having those experiences of labor being more painful, I would have maybe investigated other options. But we did what we did. The contractions were very close together, but would change with my position. So if I was on the birth ball, they were 2 minutes apart. If I was on the bed, they were 5 minutes apart, which indicated to me like maybe a positioning thing. We tried lots of spinning babies, different position stuff, lift and tucks. And I called my team over because I was feeling like I'm having contractions 2 minutes apart and they're intense and I'm needing to cope with them. And my last birth was so quick. So I want to have people over first. But I think I was coming from fear. I didn't want anyone to miss the birth. And that was like the trauma of my first birth. Like, I want my people there. I don't want to feel all alone. I think was deeper. I don't want to be all alone. I don't want to feel all alone. If I have all these people around me, I won't be all alone. So that I think was really the root of what led me to, like, from fear, invite everyone over super soon. My photographer, Rachel, got lots of photos and video of that early labor stage. And throughout the day, I just labored upstairs and had everyone downstairs and they would come up and check on me. And it was really beautiful. And at one point they said, like, I wonder, like, can we check you? Because nothing is shifting. and you're kind of still a little chatty, in between contractions. So we're kind of wondering how far along you are. So they checked me and I was one after what it was at maybe 8 or 9 hours, 10 hours of early labor. So I was devastated. And I remember feeling there was a moment where I entered a trauma pattern. The trauma was such a huge theme of this birth, where I chose to be alone. I chose to isolate myself inside of myself a little before this check. And I just felt suddenly like things were going really well. And then suddenly emotionally, I felt really bad and I didn't tell anyone. It's like in this trauma pattern, I felt like I couldn't and I had to be alone. I felt so afraid. So I was just with fear, isolating myself, really afraid of being out of control and really afraid of being vulnerable. And I had so many wonderful people who I could have talked to about that, but I chose not to. So when they came out to check me, I was afraid to even talk to my midwives. I was just so afraid of anyone. They checked me and I was one and I was devastated. And they said, like, we're gonna go home and we'll come back later. And it was stressful for me to like think about them leaving and having to think about calling them back. I just wanted everyone to like be here so I could relax. It's kind of how I felt. Um, and I also just felt so alone, like, and so sad in that moment. I felt like I was just crying and I didn't want anyone to look at me or see me, My doula guided me to do some inversions. I did 3 inversions and I had a really big cry. Everyone was gone. I cuddled up with my husband and we called his mentor, Thomas, the man that married us. And I was like, I just feel so sad. And I don't remember what he said, but he said something very helpful. And right after he said it, I don't even know what it was. I went into active labor immediately after and called everyone back. And my midwife had pulled into her driveway. And we called her and we said, time to come back. And it was from the very beginning so much more painful than my second and that whole birth. So that transition period with my second where I felt like I'm just in so much agony. I would say that for almost all of Ren's birth, I was in that place of just so much pain and agony. It was like very, very challenging. Um, and now I'm at a point where I'm debating telling you the rest of it, but I also wrote it down really beautifully. And I think that I would probably rather read it. Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I'll just read the rest. And I will say, at the very beginning of of the labor, I had created an altar and I saw a moth that was in my room and it had like landed around my altar on the wall and it stayed there for days. And I realized it had died on the wall. And I picked it up and I thought, like, what am I going to do with this bug? It seems special. I should maybe like put it on the altar or. And then I was like, it's a bug. I want to throw it outside. And I decided to put it on the altar. And so I did. And then I came up later that day and another moth in my room. We don't have moths really around. So all of a sudden, all these moths are around me. A moth died and landed right next to that moth on the altar. So now there are 2 moths on the altar. And I think by the time, if I'm remembering correctly, when he came, another one had died and landed on the altar. So we had like moths on the altar. It was really, really wild. Such a like interesting and beautiful symbol that was popping up. So here it goes, or here it is. So I sprawled out of bed on exaggerated side lying, using every pillow to prop my pregnant body in the right position as labor swallowed me. My husband frantically texted our team while I shouted into his hip bone. First, labor asked me to release control. I refused, committed to my illusions of security. Then labor pushed me off the cliff, plunging me into a journey through my own self-made underworld. I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to open my heart. I didn't want to let myself feel love because if I did, how would I protect myself? This is the part that was pierced by labor's sharp, unwavering presence. I'm all alone and no one loves me. The most grand illusion of my life. The greatest trick ever played on myself, where I am the trickster and the one being tricked. These illusions were woven into the fabric of my identity by small girl hands. I carried them across my heart as wise treasures of protection. The dangers of love could not enter, until the force of birth came surging through me with a power so immense, refusing wasn't an option. With each contraction, I unwillingly broke open. Moxa penetrated heat deep in my sacrum, trading back pain for spaciousness in my pelvis, and sending baby and I deeper into uncharted waters. It's going to get more intense. As she spoke these words, the intensity reached a level beyond what I knew was possible, beyond what I knew myself capable of experiencing. It was like standing in the wake of a terrible wave, knowing that once it swallows you, you'll never see air again, and yet by some miracle I survived each one. My uterus clenched down with an indescribable force, and my lower back throbbed in insurmountable pain. I channeled the agony through my lungs with each contraction until the intensity grew to a level that took my voice away. I could no longer speak, I could no longer move, and I couldn't survive a single contraction without several hands and voices guiding and holding me. The unwelcome vulnerability. This went on for hours, the end teasing to be in sight, yet it never seemed to end, only grow. I felt the pressure of my baby's head moving down and asked to be checked, hopeful that pushing was near. I vomited and shaked naked in my husband's arms, chanting, I can't do this anymore. So we moved into the birth tub, hopeful that pushing was near, but we were still climbing the mountain. I've experienced a pain-free birth. I've experienced a painful birth. And then there was this, a journey through indescribable agony and vulnerability and intensity. When I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of traumatic memories from my childhood. And when I opened them, my vision abandoned me and the room blurred. And through the haze of labor, I saw my adorable daughter, who came up for a little bit, cuddling our friend Kelsey and watching with awe, and then lying belly first on the floor in total exhaustion. She left to bed as quickly as she came. So I labored under these overarching feelings of embarrassment, fear, shame, and sadness, totally unrelated to the labor, yet somehow completely intertwined. I'm all alone and no one loves me. I was surrounded by love, yet I struggled to feel it. Labor had captured not only my body, but my heart, mind, and soul. There was no corner to escape to. Everything of mine was hers to consume, and she did so with pleasure. The more I resisted her, the stronger she became. So I chose to embrace her again and again with every passing moment. I softened into her knife, and in the presence of her pain, I blossomed open. And there in the center of the agony was the key, surrender. And I had to choose it in every moment in order to survive. So I transitioned from hands and knees in the tub to side lying in the bed, pushing still out of sight. Nicholas and Linnea arranged their bodies around mine, allowing me to grasp whomever was closest in each moment. Words, say words. Coping was not possible without constant guidance and affirmation. A massive waterfall erupted from my body while side lying in bed. I vomited repeatedly as fluid gushed from between my legs and onto my sheepskin rug. I think I'm suffering, I'd say. I want to go to the hospital. My baby minutes away. The sensation of pressure around my pelvic floor built, and so I sat on the toilet in disbelief, doubting my baby would ever come, and with a gentle push, I felt his head descending further. The best news anyone could receive in labor. It's the baby, not poop. I was really thinking like it's just I have to poop. The baby's never gonna come. I draped my arms over the side of the birth tub in a runner's lunge. My body became entirely captivated by instincts, and I birthed completely surrendered to my body without thought or outside influence. I had finally entered total surrender. Birth dissolved my desire to control. I no longer sat at the seat of myself. I stepped out of her way. My body became a channel for her love and intensity to rage through me. And on the other side, the most precious gift was waiting. My heart was set aflame, burning with longing for my baby as I pushed fully for the first time. Nothing. In the infinite space between contractions, I told Rachel to turn off the camera. Birth had defeated me. I was going to be pushing forever. Proving myself wrong with the very next push, I reached my finger inside, feeling his head travel all the way through the temple in one swoop. I opened my leg and turned to face east, softening into the fire. Moments passed in silence. I held steady until the third push surged through me and his head was born. Gentle downward traction, I instructed as Nicholas touched our baby for the first time. And he pushed gently, but he wasn't ready to come. Or I pushed gently. I remember being like, "Oh, come out, baby." And he wasn't ready. So we waited together in the cosmic paradox between worlds. The darkness of the underworld suddenly lightened, and I understood that our baby was nearly here. The angels parted the clouds, and I remembered to be joyful. I love him so much. I love you so much. Through blurred vision, I met Nicholas's eyes. And the final surge roared through me. So I roared with her as I pushed, wanting nothing more than to get him out. I felt the pressure of his little body leave mine, and I panted for a few moments as Ren glided into his father's waiting hands. My eyes opened, revealing my little baby under the water, his cord wrapped like a seatbelt around his chest. I delicately unwrapped his tether, and we both brought him to my heart. He cried, then softened. Our beautiful baby bird. There I was at the end of birth, brought to my knees by the power of Her Majesty, naked and bleeding, our arms wrapped around our child like tender wings. The silence of the night held us as we held each other in joy, in celebration, and in total raw collapse, surrounded by love. And so I shared this story for the first time, and this was with Thomas. "Tell me," he says, "did you have enough support?" "Actually, we had more than enough," I said, remembering the fullness of my birth companion's presence. "More than enough," he says. "That is what you are. Anything else is an illusion created by you to distract yourself from remembering the true essence of who you are." I'm all alone and no one loves me. The greatest illusion of my life, illumined and unwoven, reaching towards the sun in readiness to be free. I offer this to the heart of the mother, baby in arms. I'm trying not to cry. Almost there. I am born anew. Oh, thanks for letting me read that.
Very powerful.
Mhm. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
It was really, really beautiful.
Oh,
Both your journey and your story, I think so many actually women can relate. And not
yeah.
just that, but just um the absolute power of birth and how she is a teacher. Your story is so beautiful in showing that. And how if we, with awareness like yours, can really look at birth that way, there's so much wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So much wisdom. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
You're amazing with words. I can understand how you and your husband found each other through poetry.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. It was so beautiful and so hard, that birth, but I learned so much and am a much better person, mother, and also doula and educator because of, what I experienced. I used to really have an emphasis in the way that I would support women and educate them around birth to help them to see that birth doesn't have to be painful, that it can be, so many things. And pain is something we sometimes experience and sometimes don't. And what I learned from that experience is that sometimes birth can be very painful too. And there is always a deeper, medicine in the initiation that's there for us to awaken to take forward if we want to. And sometimes pain can serve as such a big, powerful catalyst for growth. And for me, it was learning to release control, learning to open my heart, and to let other people love me and let that love in. And the control piece, like I need to control everything, and I need to also like control myself and my vulnerability was just holding back my capacity for love, my ability to feel love. And that was a really big issue through a lot of my life. And now it's gone. I like feel every day, I feel my heart is open and I feel love from other people. I feel loved. And I struggled to feel love, others loving me before this birth. So I think the pain really caused me to break open and surrender very deeply, and that healing that needed to happen took place and integrated over the year. But yeah, very grateful.
Wow, beautiful. And I think that there's this strive, understandably, to want to have a positive, pain-free, if possible, maybe even orgasmic, natural birth, um, and that we can romanticize birth, and that a positive birth is only when it looks this certain way,
Mm,
whereas a positive birth can be painful. A positive birth can be moving through suffering. A positive birth can be having prodromal labor for weeks on end. Positive birth experience, it's how we frame it. And it's
mm,
also how we are open to its wisdom and not see ourselves as victims to what's happening to us, but
mhm,
understanding that surrender is an active choice and there's so much power in that. And as we do the teachings and the message and the pearls of wisdom that birth can bring us is available for us. But if we
mm,
stay in that, my birth didn't go the way that, my dream was, or, you know, fill in the blank. There's not just this is what a positive birth is. And that it goes with everything. If it becomes medicalized or there's, bits and pieces that potentially feels traumatic, there's wisdom in everything. We can turn it into wisdom, right? And yeah, I love that also you have this amazing broad spectrum now of having had a kind of pain-free birth experience. And as you said, a painful and then this, which, what would you call it? What a journey.
absolutely. Yeah, I love that I got to experience so many different experiences in that range, of what birth can offer.
Mm,
Yeah, and I feel like, I like to teach like an umbrella intention. Like if we can get really clear on a soul level of what it is that we're called to feel and experience for our birth, we can still have a lot of that like that intention, that feeling be intact, even if the details unfold differently. And I do feel like in all three of my births, my first intention was peace, and my second was love, and my third was harmony. My intention was intact, even though with my third, I wasn't planning or wanting to deal with childhood trauma during birth or to be in a trauma pattern or feel all alone or, have like so much pain. But I do feel like everything unfolded in perfect harmony. And I felt like that, what I really wanted, I still got. And that matters so much more than the other details. Yeah.
yeah, through that, whatever you want to call it, quote unquote suffering or whatever would name that, was harmony in the end, wasn't it?
Hmm.
As you went through it. So you got your intention of harmony at the end. It's like
Yeah.
it's dangerous to be like, it's again, we can't. Okay, so if you hold harmony, we think, oh, but that means a harmonious labor and birth. But
Right.
like, right? But that's not, be careful what you wish for because of course the way there, um, we don't know what that's gonna be. And to
Yeah.
surrender to that, to accept that, which, life, the divine spirit wants to give us.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh,
Um,
it was such an honor to get to be on your beautiful podcast. I've been following you for years and I love everything that you say. I love the work that you do. And I interview, people on mine and I haven't been able to be the one being interviewed before. So this felt very special, was a gift to me. Thank you so much. I feel like I also did some really great processing.
A lot of people feel that. I love that you said that. Before we wrap up, I would love to hear if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience. What advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I would invite her to really believe in herself, recognizing that, birth is a very natural event that, I believe is so perfectly and beautifully designed. And we've been taught by the culture at large that we need something outside of ourselves in order to do it. But the truth is that most of the time, you don't need anything outside of yourself in order to give birth. All these like interventions and instruction and people telling you what to do. I would say most of the time you don't need any of that. And all you really need is to believe in yourself and trust that you can do it. Developing practices throughout pregnancy of self love, of like letting your mind get quiet and really connecting to your heart. And so you can honor and recognize what it is that you're really wanting for your birth. And then, make choices to support what it is that you're wanting. I think a lot of the time, because I think of that narrative, if women choose to do something like do a home birth or a birth center or unmedicated hospital birth, like do something that feels a little different and a little more empowering, they think like that's great and that's all that they need. But often when we choose to go even deeper, we can find that there is desire for something really special that we're wanting to experience, that we're wanting to create or show up for in ourselves, to support that initiation into motherhood. Kind of like I was talking about before with the intentions. With my first birth, I remember I just really wanted to feel like my initiation into motherhood was peaceful. And I wanted to like feel peace while I was bringing her into the world. And so what I did to practice creating that experience is to um, every day, regularly, feel in my body the feeling of peace. And I practiced that again and again. And whenever I had to make a choice around like where I was giving birth and who my provider was, and all the different elements and things that I had in my birth, I would use my body as a compass to feel the feeling of peace. And then I would compare that with what was being presented to me. So
Mm,
it's this practice of like deliberately using your intuition and using your body as a compass to help you in a deeper way set up a container that's more supportive to what it is that you're wanting. So that's my little tool. And I would say to love yourself. Love yourself. Thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as the Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.